Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. It is a hot summer day, but I am here to recommend some books that I think you should read this fall. All right, so I have 13 books that I am going to recommend today. I will go ahead and start out with the books that I physically own, and then I have a few that I don't own because I either listened to the audiobook, rented it from the library, or had it on my Kindle. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with a pretty popular duology that most of you have probably heard of, if not already read, and that is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I'm just gonna hold up this box set because I'm too lazy to take them out because it's actually kind of hard for some reason. Anyway, so this follows kind of a mishmash of characters who are all relatively morally gray. They live kind of in the underbelly of their town and all have specialized skills that are related to crime. They are approached in this book to see if they can go ahead and steal a prisoner from another kingdom, because I suppose that prisoner has some sort of vaccine or a weapon. I should probably reread these because they were so confusing when I was reading them because they were relatively like complex heist stories that by now my brain is like, yeah, I don't know. But you know, it's a really great book with lots of great characters. It is relatively gloomy, if not grimy, and the characters are like I said, morally gray, and in the fall we love a morally gray character. It does have somewhat of a found family aspect since all of these people kind of come together and find each other and kind of find their place there. So it is a well-beloved story. I think Leigh Bardugo has a really great writing style that'll just make you feel cozy while definitely knowing that you're kind of hanging out in like a really grimy kind of almost Gotham vibe area. So I would definitely recommend this for the fall. All right, next up, I am going to recommend a book from one of my favorite authors right here, TJ Klune, and that is Wolfsong. So this is the first book in the Green Creek series. This is a story about a family of werewolves. We follow in this book, each book follows a different character and a different relationship. But it is a continuous timeline. And in this one, we follow Ox, and he and his mom and dad move into this house in a small town. One day his dad leaves and kind of tells Ox like, hey, I'm gonna peace out for a better life. I know you are probably just not gonna accomplish much. And I was like, you know, those usual deadbeat dad comments. And so Ox goes ahead and grows up in this town and starts working at the car shop with Gordo, who is a prominent character in the story. And one day a family moves back in because they've been living on the East Coast for a while. I believe this takes place in Oregon. Something like that. They move back in, and one of them, called Joe, befriends Ox because he's just really interested in Ox for some reason. So there is a threat to the pack. There's a couple threats throughout the story, kind of like rogue werewolves and rogue wizards. This book deals a lot with grief. There's a lot of death. They lose people that they love and care about. So high stakes. There's multiple queer representations in here. There's obviously all of them are male characters, but we do have asexual and bisexual representation as well throughout the story. So highly recommend a good werewolf story, a good story about grief and family, and finding your true self, your purpose, proving people wrong, and just excelling at life. So gotta recommend a TJ Klune. All right, so the next book I want to talk about is a thriller that some people were saying isn't a thriller, but it definitely is. And it deals a lot with racism and gentrification, and that would be When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. So I absolutely loved this book, and in this story we follow a woman called Sydney Green who lives in one of these houses. Are they called brownstone houses, or is that just a word I made up? Lives in one of these older houses that usually get broken up by floors so multiple families can live in them, and she has been noticing that those around her have been disappearing and have been replaced by white people who are buying up these houses, fixing them up, and just making everything super expensive and everything. So this book deals heavily with the racism and, like I said, gentrification. It is pretty high stakes. We have this woman who is going up against a force that no one believes is there or knows that is there. There's just little things that are happening over time that are making these disappearances seem somewhat natural, but yet if you have been living there for a long time, you would definitely say they are not natural whatsoever. So she teams up with this white guy who lives across the street. He and his girlfriend moved in. They haven't been doing that great lately. And so he starts to think that something sketchy is going on. And so the two of them team up to try and save the neighborhood and figure out where all the missing people went. This book was incredibly frustrating, and I thought it was kind of scary, to be honest. It was like making me like really nervous, and I didn't want to put it down because I was like, what's happening? It was I think it's a really great fall read, and I really enjoyed the ending and hope that Alyssa Cole writes some more thrillers, because I've tried a romance and I wasn't as big of a fan. But this one, if you haven't read it yet, get to it. All right, up next we have a queer paranormal romance, and that is Lord of Eternal Fire by Ben Alderson. This is kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling between a vampire and a witch. We have our witch, and I never know anyone's names, Jack. So we have Jack, and he is a witch that actually has powers. It seems like the powers of the witches have been draining over generations, and most of them these days just don't have any. So the fact that he has some has caused them to choose him to try and kill a monster that has been protected in a old castle manor kind of area near the town. It seems like once a year the vampire requires a sacrifice from the town. So this year our wizard boy or witch boy goes in there under the guise of being a sacrifice, in hopes that he can then go ahead and kill this monster. This is obviously a romance, so the two start to fall for each other, and Jack starts to realize that maybe the way of the witches is not that good. I thought that this book was pretty steamy. I mean, there's not like a ton of steamy scenes, but I thought it was relatively sensual, so I really enjoyed it. I thought there was just enough world building for a fantasy romance for me to be interested. or, you know, to give me what I need world building wise in a book like this. And I definitely enjoyed their relationship. So I would go ahead and suggest this, and I am looking forward to reading more books by this author as well, because he seems to have some tropes that I enjoy. Up next, we have another fantasy romance with a Beauty and the Beast inspired story. And this is actually a book that I only gave like 3.5 stars. I was a little bit disappointed by it, but it is really popular. So I think I am in the minority with that opinion. So I definitely just want to put it out there in case you want to give it a try. And that is Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm. Emma Hamm, I believe, is a relatively popular fantasy writer. We are following our main character here. I never know any of the characters' names, in case you can, if you've been here, you know. I'm just terrible at knowing authors' names, characters' names. I'm always like checking. Anyway, we're following this character, and she is a healer, and she lives at a brothel. She is not a sex worker, but she's their healer. Or there's been a plague going around for a while, and her father figure is ill, and so she makes a deal with the Fae to get a cure for this, so that she can go ahead and save her family, because she's of course worried that her sisters, who are not like really her sisters, but the girls who work at the brothel, are gonna get sick. So she heads to this island where this Fae prince has been banished because he is like grotesquely scarred. Anytime he receives a wound, instead of like healing, it just crystallizes over. And the Fae are very serious about their appearance, so they went ahead and kicked them out of their world, and he is living there. I can't remember why they sent her there, now that I'm being totally honest. I personally felt like not enough world building happened in the story. There was enough for me to decide that I would try a book 2 before giving up on this series. I also didn't feel like the relationship was developed nearly enough. It kind of went from like 0 to 60 all of a sudden. It's one of those stories where like you're like, wait, why are you in bed together right now? I mean, how did we get here? But I mean, it's definitely, from the covers, fall vibes. Fae stories, of course, always go well in the fall, as well as I just feel like, you know, old-fashioned healer types definitely give me like fall vibes. I just imagine them like walking through the woods and gathering their supplies and things like that. So it just gives me fall vibes all the way around. So I think I did a very bad job describing this book, but I have to admit, just because not a lot happened in the book, that I kind of forgot what the purpose of the story was. So not like a very high recommendation for this book, but like I said, other people seem to love it. If you want a better description of this, Ashley from, I forget what her channel name is, but I'll go ahead and link it down below, seems to really like this book. So I'm sure if you hunt through her channel, she'll have a better description of this than I do. All right, up next, I have a book that I think last year was really popular. I read it last year, maybe, or the year before, and that is the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I think sometimes there's versions that are just called the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and that is by Stuart Turton. And this is kind of a Groundhog's Day meets murder mystery story. We have a character who every day is waking up in a different body of a person who is in some way involved in the death of Evelyn Hardcastle, and they're reliving the same day every single time, but they're seeing it from a different point of view, and I believe they have maybe 7 or so days. They have like a timeline in which they need to figure out who killed this lady, and I think also maybe to try and prevent it. There also seems to be somebody else playing against them, that they are told that they need to beat. Otherwise, they will once again start all over with absolutely no memory of anything that they've already discovered, and need to go ahead and start from page 1 again. So while I did feel this book was a smidge on the long side, especially considering we're going through the same day over and over again, I did think it was a really intriguing concept, and it kept me entertained enough to continue with the story, and I did find the ending to be relatively satisfying. All right, second to last of my physical books that I'll be recommending. This one is a nonfiction. I figure fall usually is the start of school for a lot of people, so we should throw in at least one nonfiction. And I also think this one has slightly fall-like colors, and that is Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. This is a book that I gave quite a few tabs. So this book focuses on the intersectionality of feminism when it first kind of became popular, I guess you could say, was definitely more towards white women's rights. So this book definitely points out that white feminism isn't enough for people who are part of minority groups, or even, you know, queer people, or maybe even like disabled people, things like that. So I think this is a good starting point as far as intersectional feminism goes. I thought it was really easy to get through, really engaging, and so I would probably recommend that just about anyone, unless you're like you know, studied this in school, then this is probably all information that you already know. But anyone who hasn't like studied in school or read anything about it, definitely would go ahead and say at the bare minimum, try and give this one a try. All right, the last physical book is one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Ace of Spades by Faraday Ayamede. Hope I didn't like mess that up too bad. So this follows two characters, Chiamaka and Devon, and they go to a private high school where they are the only two Black students there. This is a YA Get Out meets Gossip Girl thriller. It's got similar vibes to When No One Is Watching. I believe I might have compared the two. If you like this book, read this book. I can't remember if those were the two that I compared it to, but you can check out that video and see if that's if that's the case. But they were both nominated to be kind of like heads of class for their senior year, which Chiamaka is totally excited about because that's what she wanted, and Devon is kind of like, I'm just a quiet music student, I don't really have any friends here, so I'm not really sure what's going on, but you know, if it looks good on your college resume. But soon they start receiving texts along with everyone in school that seems to be pointing out flaws or bad things or scandals regarding these two characters. So they start to work together to kind of try and figure out who is doing this, because they're feeling like they're being attacked, like they're being stalked, and that they and their future are in danger. So this has queer rep as well. Chiamaka has a relationship with another girl, and Devon is a young gay male. This book has super high stakes. It definitely had me turning the pages. I was definitely rooting for our characters to come out on top. I enjoyed that we got to see this from 2 points of view. Chiamaka is very much involved in the school and has friends there. And she is from a wealthy family, while Devon is technically a scholarship student from the other side of the tracks. So we also get to see how racism affects people from different economic statuses, but that even having wealth doesn't always protect you from the dangers that come from being in a really racist community. So absolutely love this book. Will probably recommend it till the end of time. All right, so I'm scooching over so there's a little bit more room here since I will be going through a few books that I do not own physically now. The first is a book that I just finished this last month, so you probably heard me talk about it in my August wrap-up. And that is A Skinful of Shadows by Frances Harding. I believe that's her last name. So this is a book where we follow Makepeace. I believe in the beginning of the book, she's maybe like around 12-ish years old. And she has the ability to see spirits, and they often try to enter her to kind of like take over her body or something. So she has been training to try and prevent that from happening. One day during a riot, her mother is killed, and she thinks that at one point she sees her mother's spirit in a rage. So when she hears rumors that there is a raging spirit out in the marsh, she goes out to investigate, only to instead find another angry spirit that she feels sort of a connection to, feels sympathy to. So she allows the spirit to enter her, even though she's not really sure that that's what she's doing. So it actually takes a little while for her to realize that she is not going mad, but instead has allowed the spirit into her. Because she's showing signs of madness, her mother's family decides to ship her off to her father's family, who has some deep, dark secrets. So this story takes place in the 17th century, I believe, in England. It is during a time of war, and it does include some paranormal aspects. So it's definitely a spooky read. The writing is really beautiful and haunting. So I would highly recommend reading that in the fall season. I read it in the summer, and it was still, you know, giving me those kind of cozy fall vibes. So I can only imagine how wonderful it would be to experience this story on a cold, rainy day. All right, up next, of course, I have to recommend a Riley Sager book. He seems to be kind of a staple here in the thriller community, and I would like to recommend Lock Every Door. This is a book where I listened to the audio of. I absolutely loved it. I was kind of surprised because I was a little bit disappointed by Home Before Dark, but this book just really did it for me. We follow Jewel, I believe is her name, and she's down on her luck. Her boyfriend cheated on her. She recently got let go of her job, and she has been crashing on her best friend's couch. She sees on Craigslist that there's an opportunity to apartment sit in the, what's it called? The Bartholomew, I believe is what it's called, which is a really well-known apartment that has a lot of kind of like eerie, unexplained events going around it, lots of rumors. The people that live there really like their privacy. So when she gets there, she realizes there's a lot of rules to be followed, like you can't invite anyone over, and you have to spend every night there. But she's really desperate for the $12,000 they're offering, and so she agrees. As she spends time there, she starts to realize that there's some strange happenings, including the disappearance of another apartment sitter. her. So she starts to investigate, and things start to escalate. I really just thought this book had really high intensity, had a really good pacing, and that the outcome was a pretty intriguing ending to the story. All right, and next we have Hollow Fires by Samira Ahmed, and this is a story that follows technically 2 points of view. I can't remember the female's name right now, and I'm filming on my phone, so can't really look it up. And then I believe his name was Jawad. And at the beginning of the book, Jawad is accused of bringing a bomb to school after he brings a homemade jetpack that he made from some recycled soda bottles. And eventually he experiences a lot of Islamophobia towards him and is unfortunately murdered. His murder is seen as a disappearance, so no one has found the body, and a lot of people think that he ran away, but our other character is able to hear his ghost whispering and asking her to get justice for him. So her school has been experiencing some Islamophobia, so some people have been posting some white supremacist literature from Nisha, I think is his name, and have also been making comments about the school's newspaper, which has been trying to post about some of the issues. So this is one of those scenarios where something bad has happened to minority characters or is currently in the process of happening, and people are trying to just kind of push that to the side, and so the minority characters are going to have to resolve the issue and protect themselves, because the police and the school and the rest of the community are just not willing to assist in that. So this book was incredibly moving. We do follow Jawad from beyond the grave, so it's really hard to watch him trying to get justice for his murder, and just seeing people kind of spin the story to make it seem like he ran away to, you know, kind of victimize himself when he is in fact a victim, because he's a dead body abandoned in the woods, and his parents of course are incredibly worried for what happened to their son, and they're just not getting the help that they need. So it's an upsetting story, but I think it's a really important story. It's set in very modern times, so we get to see kind of the effects that the Trump election and things like that have had on this community. So I thought we had a really strong female character. She was definitely a fighter, and it was really great to watch her go out there and fight for the justice of another member of her community, or even just a young child, because he was like 14, who unfortunately was killed too young. All right, and the second to last book is A Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. We follow our character. For some reason, I feel like his name was Jacob, but it might not have been. I'm gonna call him Jacob. If that wasn't his name, I'm sorry. So Jacob is a professor at a local, it might even be community college, and he is married with a son, and he's relatively happy about his life when one day he gets kidnapped by someone and kind of drugged and wakes up in a world that is similar to his but not quite. So it turns out that he has woken up in kind of an alternate reality, and is now trying to find his way home, because in this world his son does not exist, and he and his wife are not married. So this is a sci-fi thriller that deals with the multiverse. It just seems to get more and more outrageous. Yet for me personally, I'm not like a science nerd or anything, but it all kind of made sense to me why certain things were happening. So everything was relatively logical, and I never felt lost or overly confused. I just spent a lot of time in complete awe to what was happening, and that I was having such a great time. The pacing in this book was god tier. So I had just a wonderful time. I really enjoyed his writing as well. I thought it worked really well with the story that he was writing. And I thought that the ending was really thought-provoking, and definitely put Blake Crouch as an author that I am very interested in reading more work from. Alright guys, and the last book, we gotta put a little bit of monster romance in there. And I'm going to recommend a well-known one, but honestly, I think it deserves the hype. And that is A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by, her last name is Moon, Catherine Moon. And this follows our main character, whose name I do not know, but she is a maid for a household that is running out of money, so she is in need for a new job. She is approached by a doctor who helps women decrease stress with a certain machine of his, and that she's very interested in. He invites her over, they have a good time together, and then he lets her know about Rooksgrave Manor, which is a house where women service men who are not human. So she gladly agrees. This girl's got a huge sex drive, and she needs a few men to take care of that for her. So I thought this book was incredibly smutty, super steamy, really well written. I really loved most of the characters. I would say about 90% of them I really enjoyed. Our character has 5 men that she takes into her care. We have a Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde character. We have a invisible man, a vampire, a golem, and a sphinx. And I just think that they're really sweet together. They're all get along relatively well, except for the sphinx. He's that one character that I'm not super in love with, and he's a little bit overly protective and overly possessive of her, so I don't think he's as happy to share her, but he does warm up to the idea towards the end, which is good. But otherwise it did kind of have like a found family aspect to it. The plot wasn't like anything out of this world. I mean, it is an erotica, so it doesn't have much of a plot, but it was enough to keep the story moving and to keep me interested. So if you are into monster romances or just really steamy stories, I would go ahead and highly recommend this one. Alright guys, so those are the 13 books that I recommend you look into this fall. Let me know down below if there are any books that you think I should check out this season. And like always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!